guys, Stacy here. So this week we are actually wrapping up our series of Family Matters, where we've been looking at this family from Luke 15 in a story that Jesus is telling. And we've looked at both of the sons, but this week we are focusing by looking at the father. And one of the things that we talked about last night with group is that historically this story has been called the Prodigal Son. And that word prodigal means recklessly extravagant. Like just picture something like a gigantic wedding or a really big purchase, just something that is so extravagant it almost seems reckless. And we talked about how sometimes we can look at this story about the sons and the father, and we might see that the younger son blew all of his money on recklessly extravagant living. We might think that the elder son has a recklessly extravagant view of himself because he thinks he's worth so much more than everybody else. But really, what if recklessly extravagant describes the love the father has and the father shows to both of his sons? I mean, think about it. The younger son comes to him and essentially says, "Dad, you can go die. I just want your stuff." And instead of cutting him out or worse, punishing him, the father gives him that money and then welcomes him back. And when he's feeling shamed, he welcomes him back and throws a party for him. And even the elder son shows up to this party after working in the fields, thinking that he is owed, that he's deserving of something. He's going to tell his fat father what his demands are. And instead, his father is kind to him and shows him compassion and a recklessly extravagant love. But so often in the story, the sons miss this love of the father. They think he's going to shame them or humiliate them or that he owes them. And honestly, I think that we can kind of sympathize with that because so much in our lives doesn't feel like recklessly extravagant love. It actually feels very conditional. It feels like love is based on our performance. Like if we do good things and we have this good behavior, then we're deserving of love. But if we do bad things and we become a bad person, then we don't get the love of other people. They abandon us or they leave us. It could be kind of like trying out for a sports team. If you're good at that sports team, then it feels like you get all this attention and the playing time, the coach pays attention to you. Versus if you're not very good at that sport, you have a bad behavior, you're not getting the same kind of love. And so if the rest of our lives can feel so conditional, I have to be good and earn my love, versus if I'm bad, people will turn their backs on me and not love me the same. Why wouldn't we give this attribute to God? I mean, I would bet if I asked you, and you were really honest, if I asked you, what do you have to do to get God to like you? What do you have to do for God to show favor to you or to bless you or to show up in your story? Like me, I'd bet a lot of the things that jump to mind have to do with being a good person and a good behavior. You go to church so many times, you read your Bible, you pray, you give your money away, you do all these right things because then you'll somehow be deserving of God's love. It feels conditional. But I think that's a lie. The same way the father's love in that story with the two sons is not conditional. He always has love for his sons. God always has love for us too. It's not based on us having this right behavior. But what we just talked about was in order to better understand God, to understand his character, to understand the way that he relates to us, let's take a look at Jesus Christ. Because Jesus Christ is God on this earth, but he also has the closest relationship to God. So how does he believe that God treats people? How does Jesus himself treat people? Maybe that can give us a glimpse into God's love. Is it conditional or unconditional? So what we did is we took a look at a story in the Bible in Matthew 9. And it's when Jesus is going to ask this man named Matthew to be his disciple. But what's crazy about this is at this time, Matthew is what's called a tax collector, which was like the lowest of the low. If you want to think of someone who has all the wrong behaviors, does all the wrong things, that would have been a tax collector. They were known for working for the enemy because they worked for Rome, and they stole from their neighbors in order to make themselves wealthy. Everyone hated these guys. So for Jesus to ask him to hold this position of honor, to be his disciple, to follow and learn from him was mind-blowing. But then after that, Jesus goes to Matthew's house, and we're told that he invites all of his other sinner friends over, and Jesus has a meal with these people. which is, again, just crazy. I mean, think about who you sit down and you have meals with, who you invite to hang out with your friends when you go get food. You're showing that person equality, acceptance, love. So for Jesus to sit with these sinners and to eat with them was to show that God has this unconditional love for people, that he is always accepting and welcoming people into relationship with him. It's not based on some kind of good behavior, whether or not you deserve it. And so we talked about in Matthew 9, Jesus shows us so clearly that God has an unconditional love for people, that no matter where we've been, what doubts we might have had, what things we might have done or said, what our families look like we look like, any of those things, God is always telling us, your identity is that you're my child, that you are worth everything, and I have this unconditional love for you all of the time. In fact, Jesus and the Father in our story kind of says the only thing that ever gets between our relationship, between my love for you, is when we have a self-righteousness, when we think we don't need God's love, when we think we have to earn God's love, kind of like that elder son who said, I'm going to wait outside of this party rather than accept this unconditional gift that you're giving me of your love and your acceptance. But God is always trying to welcome us into that party. He says there's nothing you can do to run away from my love. You don't earn it. I give it to you because of who you are, because of the identity that I've already given you. So that's what we talked about this week. And there's going to be a couple of questions having to do with that. And I'll put it at the end of this talk so that you can kind of maybe you can talk to your parents about it. Maybe you can text your small group leader or a couple of people that you know from church, just to be able to stay connected and stay involved in the series that we're doing right now. All right. See you guys.